Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So this is chapter 2, Movement of Substances. In this video, I will be talking about diffusion. Okay, so this is part 1. Now I have split this chapter into 4 parts. Okay, for part 1, 2 and 3, I will be talking about theory. And for part 4, I will be trying to explain to you on how to answer questions on diffusion and osmosis. So let's start with diffusion. This is the objectives that you should know. Okay, you must define diffusion and you must also describe the role of diffusion in nutrient uptake and gaseous exchange in plants and humans. Now, in the whole syllabus, right, of biology, you'll be talking about diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Okay, so it is important for you to learn how to apply the concepts to different chapters. But for this chapter, right, it is just the basic theory, okay, on what diffusion is, what osmosis is, and what active transport is. So let's begin, okay? Now this is the definition. Now what are the important words to note, right, is the word net. Alright, so diffusion, right, is defined as the net movement of particles. You can use particles or you can use molecules, whichever way you want, but yeah, you can write particles. Molecules also can. From a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Okay, so the movement of particles, right, has to be from high to low. And we also use the word down a concentration gradient to illustrate diffusion. Diffusion will continue to occur, right, down the concentration gradient until both regions are of equal concentration. Okay, so when both regions are equally concentrated with molecules, we call this equilibrium. Diffusion does not require energy. All right, so please take note. We also use the word passive to describe processes, right, that doesn't require energy. Okay. Now, diffusion does not require the presence of a membrane for it to occur. So even if there is no membrane, right, diffusion can still occur. So let's talk about concentration gradient. Now this word is probably a little bit too heavy for you, but after a while you'll get used to it, okay? So just very simple, okay? The word gradient actually means difference, all right? So basically, right, concentration gradient refers to the difference in concentration between two regions. Normally we use the word gradient, but it's the same as difference. When we use the word down a concentration gradient, right, it refers to from high to low. Okay, so literally is down, right? When we use terms like against a concentration gradient or up a concentration gradient, we refer to the opposite direction, from low to high. Okay, so it is important for you not to mix it up when you write and when you answer questions on chapter 2, diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. This is a picture to show you what does it mean when we talk about down a concentration gradient. So 2.2, right, refers to diffusion that is from high to low. Okay, so you can see in the arrow, right, it is moving downwards. Okay, from high concentration moving downwards to low concentration. And on the other hand, right, in figure 2.3, it is the same. Okay, you can see the concentration here is very high, and so the molecules will spread out. All right, because over here the concentration gradient is low, and over here the concentration is high. Okay, sorry, not concentration gradient. Okay, the concentration over here is low and the concentration over here is high. So let's talk about the 6 factors that affects diffusion. Number 1, the concentration gradient. Okay, now the steeper the gradient, we use the word steeper, but you want to use higher also can. Steeper is I feel is a better word to use. The steeper the gradient, which means the higher the differences between the two regions, the higher the rate of diffusion. Okay, so if one side, right, if one region is very concentrated and the other region, right, is not concentrated, the molecules will move faster. If one side is concentrated and the other side is somewhat concentrated but maybe slightly lower, diffusion will still occur but slower. The second one is diffusion distance. Okay, the distance counts as well. The higher the distance, the lower the rate of diffusion. Okay, so if the distance is higher, right, that means if the two regions are further apart, the rate of diffusion, right, the speed of diffusion is definitely slower. The third one is known as surface area to volume ratio. I will talk about it later, more in the later slide. But right now, the higher the ratio, okay, the higher the ratio, the higher the rate of diffusion. And this is very important in biology. The size of the particles matter as well. Okay, the bigger the particle, or which means that the heavier the particle, of course they move slower because they are heavier, so the lower the rate of diffusion. Temperature is the fifth factor. The higher the temperature, okay, the higher the rate of diffusion. Now this has to do with what you studied before under particulate nature of matter. Okay, when we say that the temperature is higher, right, it means that the particles actually move faster. So you will see the kinetic energy of particles will increase when the temperature increases. And if they move faster, they are able to diffuse faster. And lastly, right, the medium matters as well. Okay, the denser the medium, that means if the medium is very dense, the lower the rate of diffusion. Okay, if the medium is not dense at all, like air, then the movement of particles is actually faster. So let's talk about surface area to volume ratio. Now this word is important. In the past, right, you always mention surface area, okay? But in biology, right, we need to talk about the whole concept. So it's not just about surface area alone, it is also about volume, and it is the ratio between these two. Alright? Now over here you have a 1 by 1 by 1 cube, you have a 2 by 2 by 2 cube, and a 3 by 3 by 3 cube. Now if you calculate the volume, right, for this cube, for A and B, okay, so I will just do A, B, C. If you calculate the volume for A, right, it is 1. But the surface area for A, right, is 6. If you take the surface area divided by volume, which is ratio, you get a high value of 6:1. But if you talk about cube B, right, you see the surface area for cube B is 24, but the volume is 8. Now it seems that cube B is bigger, but it doesn't mean that it is better, okay? Because, right, the surface area is lower at 3:1. And for C, right, even though it is a very, very big object, the surface area is higher, yes, but when you divide by the volume, you can see that for cube C, the surface area to volume ratio is actually the lowest. Now, what does this mean in biology? Okay, sometimes, right, in biology, being bigger doesn't mean being better in terms of efficiency, in terms of how the cell works. Okay, if you recall, right, cells are actually always small. You don't really see a cell with the naked eye because they are small, right? And cells do grow, yes. But when they grow to a certain size, right, they will start to divide and they will become small again. Okay, this is the reason, right, is to keep the surface area to volume ratio high. All right? Why? Because cells, right, they need to absorb substances, they need to release substances, and they need substances to move within the cell. So if you remember the factor on diffusion distance, right, you will know, right, that why is it better for a cell to be small? Okay, so that the movement of substances, right, whether it's going into the cell or whether it is coming out of the cell or whether it is moving inside the cell, it has to be efficient. Okay, so by having a higher surface area to volume ratio, right, by having a high surface area to volume ratio, it is able to keep their efficiency high. Okay, and this is what we meant when we talk about surface area to volume ratio. So in a nutshell, you used to learn surface area, but surface area alone doesn't nail it at all. Okay, you have to talk about volume as well. So here are some examples of diffusion. Okay, you see in your everyday life, whether it is incense that is spreading in the room, okay, whether you are making tea and all the tea molecules are diffusing into the water. When you are eating food, right, you can smell the aroma of the food spreading through the room. On the other hand, if you smell rubbish or when you are near a sewage area, you can smell the sewage because of the diffusion of the sewage molecules. Okay, when you spray perfume, you will see the aerosol, the little droplets, right, diffusing through a distance. Okay, after a while, right, the whole room will smell of the perfume, right? So because of diffusion. And finally, this last one that I'm highlighting to you is a classic example of solid diffusing into solids. Now you probably have not used a chalkboard before, but if you use chalk and write on the blackboard, right? If you leave it on for a very long time, the chalk cannot be erased. Okay, because the chalk particles, right, actually diffuses into the blackboard uh, surfaces. Okay, so yeah, this last example is pretty rare, but these are all examples of diffusion. Okay, now how do we apply diffusion in biology? You will come across all these examples as we move throughout the chapters. Okay, so number one, right, when plants photosynthesize, the carbon dioxide enter the plant. Okay, you probably know this from primary school. So the absorption of carbon dioxide into the plant, right, is a form of diffusion. When plants transpire, right, which you'll learn in later chapter, the release of water vapor into the air is also by diffusion. When we talk about roots absorbing mineral salts and oxygen, it is also diffusion. Okay? For animals, right, when you study digestion, after you eat, the nutrients that you eat, right, will be absorbed into the small intestine. This absorption, right, is also diffusion, partly. All right? And when you inhale, the oxygen in your lungs will diffuse into the blood. And this one is not in syllabus, of course, but for some animals, right, like amphibians, like frogs, okay, the skin is perpetually moist because, right, they are able to absorb oxygen from the air. Okay, so all this absorption, right, whether it's in a plant or whether it's in an animal, all uses diffusion in nature. Okay, so that's it. Okay, this is the video done just purely on diffusion. If you have any questions, please ask. And yeah, okay, see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.